I'm right where I belong, playing guitar and singing songs. These words are all I own. I'll keep going, but I'm not gone. People think that I just don't care. Suddenly, I'm naked again, in the very same room as my child. Only now I'm sitting big inside the edge. Cave blankets, innocent wild, denying voice here and there all the while. Only now I'm not so far from there with a
Welcome everyone to the second annual Toledo and Milken Family Service Day. We are thrilled to have partnered together for the past 3 years on Zoom doing the monthly sack lunch program for Hope of the Valley. We thank all of you who participated and continue to participate in this program again and now.
So each of our schools has a long history with Hope the Mission, and over the past 2.5 years, together our two schools have donated over 6,000 lunches together, and today we're going to add another 400 more lunches. We said hello to Jenny. She sang for us, and you're going to hear a little bit more, but I'm going to give you a little background. So Jenny is a singer-songwriter, Jenny Alpert, also known as her birth name, Cami, and she's here to share her story of when she found and reunited with her birth father, Don, of blessed memory, 6 years ago, who at the time was homeless, yet a musician just like her. Through their biological reunion story, their adventures, and her advocacy over the years they had together prior to his passing, she ultimately helped him assimilate into society for the first time in his life. With support, shadowing, and motivating his extraordinary transformation from self-identified vagrant to self-esteemed volunteer. In discovering Hope the Mission while securing social services and stability for Don, they became key speakers and volunteers there, inspiring other people in need. Jenny has continued the work volunteering with Hope the Mission, and I know that she has been involved in all of their different sites and shelters. And some of you may know Jenny in the Jewish community as song leader Par Par. Please welcome Jenny, also known as Cami.
The video that you just saw, in photos tells the story of Jenny and her beloved birth father, Don. So Jenny, you had shared with me that your story, your personal story, begins in foster care and that you were adopted. So tell us how you found your birth father. What motivated you to go look for Don?
Oh, hello.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me today. Join you for the second year in a row. I love what you're doing, by the way. It's amazing. To make bags and notes and lunches for those experiencing homelessness to have a better day, just one moment of their day peaceful, is not just a mitzvah, but it's really honoring the concept of tikkun olam, because 1 second that you do to make a difference can be a domino effect to change the world. So kudos to you for this day. So my name is Jenny Alpert. While my birth father was alive, because he recently passed, I went by my birth name Cami, reclaiming it on a journey of self-discovery. I was adopted out of the foster care system when I was 4. I was put in the foster care system right when I was born, and moved around quite a bit during the court case of trying to figure out where would be the most fitting home. Years later, when I was deciding to figure out how I wanted to build a home of my own, which I'm still doing, I felt that the missing piece was learning about my birth parents and the lineage. I had known a bit of the story about them and how they met and what happened to them based on the court case early on, but I didn't know a lot of details except for the fact that my birth mother had passed before I had a chance to meet her, and she was of Jewish lineage. And my birth grandfather had made it a point to make sure that I was adopted into a Jewish family so that I could continue the Lador Vador concept just by being around ethics, values, morals, whatever it was that this family could provide for me, which they did incredibly so. So I'm always eternally grateful for the Alperts for what they've done for me. Not Herb, by the way. Right. So as I decided to go looking for my heritage, my lineage, my history, the missing link at the time was my birth father. I knew he was living, but I didn't know much more about him than the few pieces that made people scared and suggested to me not to look, which of course made me look. So in my circle of friends, there was somebody who offered a connection to a private investigator who was generous enough to help me find my birth father through his Social Security. Because if you don't know, our Social Security number sort of traces everywhere we've lived, everywhere we've gotten mail, what we've done, maybe things we wish we hadn't. So my birth father had quite a story, and it was quite documented, similar to mine in the sense that mine was documented through the court system of being adopted. His was documented through the court system of being in and out of prisons and jails because he enjoyed drugs as a sense of feeling better and experiencing homelessness by choice as a way of freedom. And these things I came to discover when I found where he was most recently dwelling at the time, getting mail from the police. But what I didn't know at the time when I met him was that he was a musician, just like me. And another thing I didn't know, but I happened to come with an open heart and an open mind and a lot of social service skill set that just by proxy my life had unfolded, allowed me to learn about through UCLA and volunteering for years and years and years. I had a set of what I call a belt of tools. So I didn't go in what I would call the field blindly. I actually went in with lots of strategy and thoughts in advance, which we'll get to in a minute. But the second that I saw him and found him and knew he was who he was, he recognized me the same. And it was the beginning of an incredible 5-year transformative partnership and story. So I'm excited to share more about that.
I'm already emotional, Jenny. So Jenny, tell us, there must have been obstacles when you first met him. I mean, I'm sure it just isn't, hey, you're living on the streets and, wow, let's go find a house. So share with us the biggest obstacles and how did you help him transform?
It's funny, the way that I see the world, I see them as opportunities rather than obstacles, and I think that was one of the key things that helped move things forward. Another thing was that I didn't have one set idea or vision or plan, which also I think helped, because having a vision board and goals with openness for things to transpire is a really healthy way to approach life. But there were moments when I first was working with Dawn where there was a lot of unknowns. Okay, so we're gonna, right, so obstacles. So, opportunities. When I first found Dawn, he was residing in an alley space. I don't know if we can put on the photo montage, if you don't mind, the one from the beginning. If you don't mind, because the photos can kind of help us see. So Don was living in a couple of different spaces outdoors. He was, at the moment that I found him, he was running from the law. He was still using drugs. To go into the jail or the prisons, you have to honor your time, respect the space, and then come out and commit to being sober. But sober is a funny word because it can mean different things to different people. And what I came to discover quite quickly was that Dawn was a unique individual that succeeded better in the parameters of possibility rather than the boundaries of constriction. So I use a lot of what I call solution-solving suggestions, and I coined a bunch of terms, and together we partnered to create our story without even really intending to. So some of the struggles, I think, that made it interesting were the unknowns and the surprises, right? Because that's kind of how life is. In the beginning, for the first few months, he was just following my lead, and for the most part, the 5 years, he allowed me to be what I call a shadow. So I was shadowing him with the skills that I learned to help him make decisions socially in environments that he hadn't really ever experienced before. So some of the social skills that we used, we agreed to as, like, for example, a blindfold. So he'd never really been inside of a comfortable house, familiar with a shower or a bed. And I didn't want to just throw the idea that this was an option that was better, because it's not necessarily better, it's different, because everyone has a reason why they choose what they choose, right? So the idea was that we would introduce him to these different things as options, and then whatever he took to, they would become routines. There was an incident where it was like 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and that can happen. But one thing I would say, I wouldn't advise anybody to go into the field and work directly with anyone experiencing homelessness or addiction without a lot of experience and a lot of support. I felt confident and comfortable to do it myself, but I wouldn't suggest that to just anyone, because it's a very involved process, and you have to have a lot of skills and a lot of emotional capability to be able to allow for transition and transformation to come at its own time. So it's an ebb and flow. So I guess that would be one thing that I would say.
Tell us a little bit about the connection to Hope of the Valley, and that would be great.
So Hope of the Valley, now known as Hope the Mission, which is really, it is kind of a tongue twister change. Hope of the Valley started as a little church, actually, up in the valley. And they used to do hot meals and offer an open door to anyone experiencing homelessness. I mean, way back in the 80s, or I think maybe early 90s, if I can remember the timeline well. And it just has grown and grown and grown into this mastermind. It's incredible. So it's now called Hope the Mission because it's a bigger mission, a bit bigger concept. There's not just hot lunches. There's not just lunchtime opportunities. There's not just like a day center with social services available to you, but now there are what are called tiny home villages that are popping up all over the valley and the city. Really incredible design, I think made by a designer in Chicago, if I'm not incorrect, but they brought the design here, and they work with different city council all over the city to help devise different strategies and different types of shelter suggestions for different people's story. And I think the most important thing to offer for a takeaway is that no one person experiencing or choosing homelessness has the same reason, or the same story, or the same needs, or the same preferences, or the same capabilities. So it's a bit of a challenge if you look at the numbers of how many people are experiencing homelessness and how many people are here to help. And then how do we bridge the gap of the different types of solutions to set forth for every different type of demographic? It's a bit of a challenge, but that's the exciting part, is that there are organizations like Hope the Mission who are creating different options all at once. The way we found Hope of the Valley before it became Hope the Mission was kind of a funny story. So because Don was choosing homelessness and using to feel better, and very consciously aware of his choices, he was a savant, musician, chess player, very creative, and he was a survivor. The way that he would be homeless himself is he would find places that were near casinos because he was good with math, and he was good with the probability and strategy, and he really loved playing cards, and he loved dice and all these things. And so he would find casinos where the freeway off-ramps were, where there was the biggest bush, go inside at night, pull out the middle of the bush, pop open some kind of tent where you couldn't see, get his wiring together so he could get electricity through wiring and batteries. And then he would live there and take his food stamps, which is totally not okay. And he would go and he would get gambling, whatever they were, the coins, and he would try to double the money so that he could have money for things he needed. Plus you get free food. So it was a really interesting way of surviving. And he chose drugs. He used to say, one of my favorite quotes of Don's was, well, you would do the drugs I did if you had to hang around the people I had to hang around. Right? That was like a funny quote. Or he would say, I think the psychiatrists are just as crazy as the crazy people. Because he was very used to authority overwhelming him and making decisions based on projections and judgments to the point where he was just too overwhelmed to stand up for himself and have verbiage and boundary. It was just too overstimulating for him, which is why for us, the partnership we developed and becoming his shadow and becoming his advocate was a really strong partnership for us. And the other thing I would add is that what made our story really special, I think, was that we both really benefited from each other in terms of love, giving love, receiving love, being loved together. And he went from a self-identified, what I call vagrant, to a self-esteemed volunteer in the 5 years of our partnership. And some of the photos are showing different programs that we designed for Hope of the Valley, Hope the Mission, at their lunch times, where we go in and do performances and we would speak and share our story, help them paint art, help them, even if it's just 10 minutes or 5 minutes of magic for them to have a moment of peace. You never know where that moment of peace can go. So that's the story of my birth father, Don, and myself. And there's a documentary called Homeless, the soundtrack, that's online if you want to see it.
Tell us a little bit about, so just to close, just tell us a little bit about the music with Don and, of course, you as your own very successful musician, Jewish and secular.
Successful, I don't know, but thank you. So I'm an independent singer-songwriter. I think in the very beginning of my introduction to music, I didn't really know how to build relationships and partnerships so well. I knew the beginning stages of opening doors, but to establish them and to build lifelong relationships is something that I think can be challenging for many people, but there is a skill set there, and there's also I call it the frontal lobe feeling, to get out of that moment and to be able to see bigger picture. You can oscillate between the two, but it's easier if you can step back and see a bigger picture and slow things down to be able to build these relationships. So I was an independent singer-songwriter, less than actually a part of a team or a group, and learned a lot in the field that way, making records, recording, releasing them, touring the world, which mirrored actually my early childhood of moving from foster home to foster home. It was really easier for me to jump from audience to audience, say hello, do a thing, and then bounce on to the next. And so there was a symbiotic concept to that with discovering Don and his bouncing from prison to prison and jail to jail and street to street corner, because for him it was the same kind of idea that he could move from one place to the other, and the moments kind of turned into these different adventures. So there was a team, a documentary team that came together during the beginning stages of our biological reunion story. And they followed us around, they interviewed us. It's about 26 minutes. It's called Homeless, the Soundtrack. It's available on Google or Apple Stream. And it's a really sweet little nugget of the bigger picture of the whole story of the transformation that took place because of our partnership and because of our unconditional love with parameters of possibility. And then the other thing I'd share is that this is my memoir that we wrote together in 3 weeks, actually, before he passed away. It's called Home is Where the Heart Is, an adoption and biological reunion story. It encompasses details of how we met, past of Don's history, mine, a bit of my birth mother, how adoption influences and defines a person, how biological reunions, what they do as an impactful piece of filling in gaps to help us develop our identity, and what it's like to partner with people and create what I call parameters of possibility, so that you can develop relationships and love and support in healthy ways. And it has photographs, and it talks about Hope of the Valley and how amazing they are, and how we discovered them in one of our day journeys, what I called Family Fun Field Trip Adventures. And we happened upon this little day center we didn't know anything about that had an AA meeting. And then Dawn was so excited to go in and play chess. And then when I came back to pick him up that day, we discovered Hope of the Valley and their services and utilized the relationship building with Lori and Ken Craft. Some of the steps, the stages of the rest of our story of how he got social services, how he got SSI, how he got medical care, how I helped facilitate those things, but where those resources initially came from, Hope of the Valley helped us pinpoint the best route to go. And so that's the amazing piece about nonprofits that can help, and what you're doing today, which is bridging the gap and providing a moment of peace for somebody experiencing homelessness. I just think that it's a really great thing. So thank you so much for having me. So I don't know if anybody even plays CDs anymore. So you can donate money if you want a book, or if you want a CD, you can donate, but also you can just take one. You're welcome to take them. So this is one called No Second Guesses, and there's a couple of other CDs, and they're just available for later. You can just come up and say hi and take one or whatever. That's it.
Thank you so much for this inspiring story. It takes a very unique, strong, soulful person to go through the journey that you did. And we are so appreciative that you shared something so personal with all of us. So we're gonna snap instead of applaud to just show you our love.
Again, so much, Jenny. You know, part of when we do service, it's really, the learning part is really important, and I think that she really shared a very different and unique perspective, and a perspective that we don't all have access to. So thank you very, very much. It's really important information for us to know all the different types of people that we are, that to keep in mind when we are making lunches, when we're writing the notes. Okay, so the next part of our day is our action. And it starts with what a lot of you have already started doing, decorating a lunch bag. Everybody's going to be making a minimum of 5 lunches. So you'll decorate 5 lunch bags. Make the lunch bags colorful, make them fun. You know, the color is, you know, it's another addition to their day when they get the lunch bag color. Write a thoughtful note to the recipient. Our world needs you. You know, those kinds of important messages are good to put on the notes. And then you're going to go make a sandwich and put together the whole lunches. So there are sandwich and lunch making stations. There's one back here, and there's one out in front. I would take no more than 2 of your lunch bags. I would decorate all the lunch bags. Leave at least 3 of them on your tables. You could take 1 or 2. You'll come up here.
To introduce Founder Ruffy, the Hope the Mission, whom we're honored to have here and share a few words with us. Thank you.
Fun part of the nonprofit, which is communication, so email marketing, working with the community, and this is my first time joining you guys at Keep the Cheese Sandwich Live. And I just want to let you guys know that none of this goes unnoticed. We have a navigation center where people come, they line up from 6 in the morning waiting to get seated with a case manager. And this is people who live on the streets here in LA. They drive or they catch the bus and they come up to our navigation center, and when they're lined up there, that's the only center where we don't provide a hot meal. And what do we do if we can't provide them a hot meal from our kitchen? This is what we give them. We give them the lunches, and they can sit and eat before they get into our job center, before they get a case manager. And we want to let you guys know, since we're all family here and you guys are together, we are opening up 3 new family shelters this year. And it's going to offer 724 beds to homeless men, women, and children. There's a whole lot going on, and just to wrap it up, you guys are doing a really big part by doing this all together, and I appreciate every single one of you. And Ken Craft, our founder and CEO himself, has nothing but great things to say about both your schools. So thank you guys so much, and continue the great work, because we are the future.
I'm right where I belong, playing guitar and singing songs. These words are all I own. I'll keep going, but I'm not gone. People think that I just don't care about making sense or brushing my hair. Pulled up my roots, they ain't growing anywhere. Guess you could say I